Which is what if half-demon Naruto built the ultimate harem with Sakura, Ino, Hinata, Anko, Ayame, Tsume, Hana, Yugao, Kurenai, Fem Haku, Fem Jashin, Fem Hidan, Fu, Yugito, Tenten, Chiyuya, Kin, Karui, Samui, Shion, Koyuki, Mei, Tsunami, Tsunade, Natsuhi, Konan, and Fem Kyubi. Part 8. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It had been nearly 2 days since Naruto and Koyuki had rejoined the convoy, and it had gone about as well as the blonde Hanyu had expected. Throughout the day, Sakura would watch over and converse with the princess, telling her further embarrassing stories about Naruto, much to the blonde's dismay. Kakashi continued to assign Naruto to other sections, away from the princess, and had at least one more time attempted to assign Sasuke to her, which had backfired spectacularly in the masked pervert's face when the princess had erupted in another tangent and had not so kindly reminded the man that the brooding emo had nearly killed her with his egotistical rant not too long ago, and that it was only due to Naruto that she had survived. Something the masked Jonin did not like being reminded of. Aside from that, the blonde had continued to plan for the inevitable ambush. Though he could see that both Kakashi and Sasuke were not taking his warning seriously, prompting him and Sakura to plan to pick up the slack so that none had to pay the price for the duo's blind ignorance. During his planning, Naruto had also discovered that while Koyuki and himself were in the cave, Asama had sent a scout ahead of the convoy through the snow to gather the rebels from the village, in hopes of creating a counter-ambush, having taken Naruto's warning seriously. With the life of the princess at stake, the elder man did not want to take any chances. Though while the man had meant well, that had left Naruto with another problem. How to protect the rebels as well. Naturally, he knew Kakashi would refuse to aid the rebels, citing some bullshit that it was not within their mission parameters, and technically he would be correct. However, Naruto would not allow others to suffer if he could do something about it. It was only a matter of determining how the ambush would happen. Imagining a multitude of scenarios that could happen. Everything from the snow shinobi attempting to overwhelm them with sheer numbers, triggering another avalanche to bury the convoy in the snow, or use of technological superiority, judging by the armor that the 3 snow shinobi had worn during their first engagement. But, he had settled on one plan that should cover all angles. He just hoped it would work. It's about to happen any moment now, isn't it? Sakura asked, as she came up beside the blonde who was staring out through the window at the snowy mountainside, snapping the teen out of his thoughts. Yeah, be ready for anything, Sakura-chan. Naruto replied before turning to face her, a true look of concern in his eyes. And above all, be careful. I will, Naruto-kun. She replied as she leaned into the blonde and laid her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes as she fell into her mate's comforting presence. From the corner of the cabin they were in, Koyuki could only mentally sigh to herself as she peered over the script she was pretending to read, as the couple consoled one another before the upcoming ambush. Like her producer, the young princess had also taken the blonde Hanyu's warning seriously, and was intent to do her best to not be a burden. As she watched the couple, she couldn't help but think back to how it felt to be wrapped in the blonde's embrace while they were in the sleeping bag, a small blush creeping across her face, which deepened even further as she recalled the lack of clothing neither of them had. Koyuki Haim, the director of the film, shouted as he swung open the door of the trailer they were in, allowing a burst of cold air to invade the warm interior. We need to find a male lead for the film. The young princess could only sigh as she knew this was going to be brought up eventually, since she had not notified any of them that she had requested Naruto to take the role. Though before she could respond to the director to reassure him that she had already secured a male lead, the masked Jonin stood up and places his hands on Sasuke's shoulders in a manner to present the arrogant Uchiha as a candidate for the role. I am sure Sasuke here could handle it no problem. Kakashi gave his trademark eye smile to the director. The director was silent as he looked the raven-haired boy up and down, rubbing his chin in thought. Can he act? The man finally inquired, still unsure of the young teen being presented to him to be considered for the part. I am sure he can pull it off. The masked Jonin responded, giving another eye smile. With it being an Ika film, I don't think too much will be required. At this, Koyuki couldn't help herself but to giggle at the silver-haired mon's statement. At first, Kakashi thought that she was giggling because she was considering the idea of having Sasuke star in the film with her, however that quickly changed when he saw her narrow her eyes at him. I'm afraid you are behind in current events, Hitaki-san. Koyuki responded with a clipped tone, though still flash a malicious and almost gleeful grin as she continued. That trash got cancelled before we even left port. Despite himself, the masked Jonin couldn't help but flinch as the princess called the smut he loved so much, trash. Mentally, he imagined himself rubbing the favored orange book as if he were consoling it from the hurtful things the young actress had said about it. Even more so, the perverted man felt absolutely crushed that the Ika Ika movie had been cancelled. And don't worry, I've already talked with someone I trust to take up the male lead for the film. She continued, turning her attention towards the director. However, he will not begin filming until all this is sorted out. What do you mean, sorted out? The director asked. And who did you get to come play the male lead? It is clear that we will not be able to film while my uncle is sending shinobi forces to kidnap me, and no doubt, to kill anyone who is with me. Koyuki stated. So until my uncle is no longer a threat, all filming is to be put on hold. Koyuki Haim, does that mean? Asama approached her, hopeful. I will be taking my throne back from my uncle, and free these people from his oppressive rule. She replied to the unasked question, earning a nod of approval from both Naruto and Sakura. Meanwhile, the elder producer had tears running from his eyes at the princess's proclamation. I don't care who you have called in, there is no way he is better than me, a Uchiha elite. Sasuke stated as he moved towards the princess, causing her to scowl, whilst Naruto and Sakura poised to react if need be. You should be honored that I would even consider being in this film. Listen here Uchiha, and listen well. Koyuki narrowed her eyes at the arrogant raven-haired emo. You may flaunt your Uchiha arrogance within your village and get your own way, but you are in Yuki no Kuni, and your name is worthless in these lands. Furthermore, I feel absolutely disgusted to have you within my presence. It is only because of Naruto-kun and Sakura-san that I even tolerate your foul stench. Kakashi, Asama, and the director could only stand there and gape at the princess's words, while the Uchiha seethed in anger that the young woman had dared to talk down to him as if he were below her, like some lowly peasant. Now you listen here, bitch! Sasuke exclaimed as he moved towards her in an aggressive manner, intent on putting the princess in her place beneath him. However, before he made it halfway, Naruto had flashed between them. Holding his dark blade in a reverse grip position, with the point aimed directly at the Uchiha's throat. Shocking both Sasuke and Kakashi, as neither had seen Naruto move. Just behind him, Sakura was beside Koyuki, gently pulling her back out of harm's way, in case the arrogant duck attempted something. I believe that is quite enough. The blonde stated in an even tone, his piercing blue eyes staring directly into the Uchiha's, causing the raven-haired boy to flinch slightly at the coldness of Naruto's voice. Naruto, Kakashi began, only to be interrupted. Hataki-san, I strongly suggest you put this arrogant fool on a tighter leash. Koyuki stated, with a cold edge to her voice from behind the two Hanyus. Lest he finds his head on the gallows once I claim my throne. The masked Jonin gulped at this and silently nodded before he placed a firm hand on the Uchiha's shoulder to pull him back. Once the raven-haired emo was a satisfactory distance away, Naruto cancelled his blade. Though kept an eye on the two Sharingan users, in case the Uchiha attempted something else. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto spoke up, catching the masked Jonin's attention as the blonde hardly ever called him by his name unless it was absolutely serious. Perhaps you should take Sasuke-tem outside for a bit to cool down. It won't do us any good if he is set on attacking our own client. As much as the silver-haired Jonin had wanted to chastise the blonde for essentially taking over, he knew Naruto was right. Sasuke was already treading in dangerous waters with his latest actions, and the masked pervert was sure that his favored student was going to have to face some sort of punishment when this was all over. Either from the Hokage or from Koyuki herself. The latter having already threatened execution, in which the council in Konoha would have no jurisdiction over to get their beloved Uchiha out of it. Come on, Sasuke, Kakashi stated, leading the raven-haired teen out of the cabin. Leaving those remaining to breathe a sigh of relief. Are the rebels in position, Asama-san? Naruto turned to the elder producer. They should be by the time we reach the pass you suspect the ambush to happen. The man replied, but why have them so far away? They are eager to fight for Koyuki Haim. I know, which is why I've asked you to have them stay back. The blonde stated, earning a confused look for not only the elder man, but also Sakura. Naruto-kun, what are you planning? The pinkett inquired with a small frown. Something that will save a lot of lives. He sighed. Truth was, he wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it was a chance he was willing to take. given that it had consumed nearly 3/4 of his chakra reserves to initiate his plan to begin with. Still, the blonde Hanyu had a feeling in his gut that Dodo was going to attack them with something so brutal, it would crush the rebellion in a single stroke, and the best way to avoid that was to not have the rebels there at all. Hence why he had replaced their entire ranks with shadow clones he had sent ahead to henge as the rebels, with the actual rebel army hiding well behind the fake army. I expect to see the 3 we fought before to show up. Naruto continued. When they do, I will square off against Fubuki, the pink-haired one. What? My hair isn't pretty enough for you? Sakura teased, causing the blonde to chuckle slightly. Don't be jealous, Sakura-chan. You'll always be my cherry blossom. He teased back, earning a blush from his pink-haired mate. But in seriousness, I want to talk to her and ensure she is safe. Because one way or another, this ends today. Either they manage to wipe out the rebellion, or we take them out and go after Dodo himself. Please, be careful, Koyuki said, concern laced in her voice. Both of you, don't worry. Naruto winked at her, causing her to blush. We won't leave you alone with that arrogant duck. This of course, caused both Sakura and Koyuki to laugh softly at the absent Uchiha's expense, allowing a sense of levity to fall between the 3. Half an hour later, silence passed between the occupants as they continued on their way towards the village that they were set to arrive in within the hour. Sasuke had opted to stay on the far end of the cabin, mostly due to Kakashi's insistence that the young Uchiha not cause further trouble for himself. Though that didn't stop the raven-haired teen from casting angry glares towards the princess and Sakura. The two had noticed this, but had ignored the brooding emo, which only infuriated him further. Meanwhile, Naruto had taken position on top of the truck to keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. Stretching out his sensing capabilities as far as they could go, picking up locations of the various wildlife in the immediate area, and of course, the awaiting forces of the snow shinobi just a bit further up the roadway. Closing his eyes, he focused on the enemy forces, aiming to get a more accurate reading for what they were about to encounter. Among the forces, he could feel the chakra of the 3 snow shinobi that had attacked them on the boat. However, as he focused on the enemy forces, he noticed something that caused him to frown. While they were a considerate size, it was nowhere near as much as he had expected Dodo to send. It was as if the tyrant had something else planned. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto began to speculate what the madman's plan could be. Guess we will find out soon enough. The blonde thought to himself as he jumped down to let the others know. Be ready for anything, Ari-chan. Right, Naruto-kun. The Kitsune girl nodded. Better let the others know of what's about to happen. Naruto mentally commented as he pounded on the roof a few times with his foot, to give Sakura the signal to get ready. Inside the cabin, the occupants all looked towards the source of the pounding before looking amongst one another. Nodding to one another, Sakura and Koyuki moved over to where Asama and the director was, earning a questioning look from the masked Jonin. What's going on? Kakashi inquired, looking up from his orange book. Naruto-kun is warning us of the upcoming ambush so we can get ready, and keep Koyuki, Haim and the film crew safe. Sakura replied, earning a scoff from the brooding Uchiha. The dope is probably just faking it to make himself look better than he actually is. Sasuke commented dismissively, I highly doubt an ambush will happen. Kakashi mildly agreed with the Uchiha. If anything, we will only see the 3 that attacked us previously. This of course prompted both Koyuki and Sakura to roll their eyes, while Asama frowned at the masked Jonin. The elder producer for one was glad that at least 2 of the Konoha shinobi he had hired were capable of doing the job. One of which that had even gone well above and beyond what was asked. If you do not trust Naruto-kun to relay accurate information about an impending attack, then why assign him to keep a lookout if you will just ignore his warnings? Koyuki countered, causing the masked Jonin to sigh and relent to the princess's reasoning. However, Kakashi didn't get much time to dwell on it as the truck and the convoy came to a sudden halt. It's happening, Sakura stated as she looked to the film crew and princess to issue instructions. Everyone outside, but stay near the trucks for cover. Sakura, why? Kakashi's words fell on deaf ears as everyone aside from himself and Sasuke had exited the truck, prompting the masked Jonin to sigh as he jumped out as well with the Uchiha behind him, becoming a little frustrated that both Sakura and Naruto had essentially taken over this mission. Once outside, he was greeted with the sounds of a massive battle as shouts and screams echoed from just beyond a large snow bank that now blocked the path of the trucks. 3 familiar forms standing atop them, sneering down at the Konoha shinobi. It's been a while, hasn't it? Hatake. Naruto greeted sarcastically, earning a chuckle from both of his teammates. Knowing what was about to happen, Kakashi uncovered his Sharingan eye, and braced himself for the inevitable attack from the three snow shinobi. Meanwhile, Naruto jumped down from the roof of the truck he was standing on, causing the larger of the snow shinobi to flinch slightly at the sight of the blonde, causing the Hanyu to chuckle to himself. "Hey, a big guy," Naruto stated with a sadistic grin, zeroing in on Mizore. "How's the ribs?" Once more, the large snow shinobi flinched slightly, unconsciously bring a hand up to cover his barely healed ribs that had been cracked from the month's earlier encounter with the blonde. "Alright, pleasantries are out of the way," Fubuki commented as she crouched down, ready to leap into action. "Let's take care of these assholes and bring the princess back to Dodo-sama." Fine, the lilac-haired shinobi shrugged. "Mizore, you take, I got the pink-haired bitch," the larger shinobi stated. He absolutely refused to fight Naruto once more. "PFF, whatever," Fubuki shrugged. "I'll take the handsome one." "Flattering, but you're not my type," Sasuke retorted as he readied himself with a kunai. "I was talking about the blonde one, you duck the emo." The pink-haired snow shinobi scoffed. Though she didn't miss the blonde in question as well as his pink-haired teammate chuckling to themselves at the Uchiha's expense. "Whatever, just kill them," the lilac-haired man ordered as he moved to engage Kakashi. "You will not take Koyuki home," Asama exclaimed as he came running up to the group, dressed in a traditional samurai armor, signifying the elder Mon's former position of the royal guard for the princess's father, and by extension, the princess herself. Stopping atop a hilltop not too far from where Team 7 and the princess were. Behind him were a large contingent of rebel troops, all equipped with various makeshift armors and weapons. Very few actually held anything that could truly be considered as armor, or weapons, as most of them were just leather hides with fur and various farming tools to use as weapons. However, there was determination in their eyes, telling those before them that they would not yield, even if it cost them their last breath. "Ah, look, the farmers wanna play soldier," Mizore scoffed at the ragtag group. "Good," Naruto stated with a malicious grin. "We can crush these pathetic ants in one swift stroke. Ready the kunai launchers." All the Konoha shinobi, including Naruto's, eyes widened at the lilac man's last orders. None of them liking the sound of what a kunai launcher could be. Immediately on the mountain side, multiple snow piles exploded, exposing small groups of snow shinobi standing behind what appeared to be a weird cannon of some kind. "Fire!" the lilac-haired man shouted. "Shit," Naruto mentally cursed as he quickly ran towards the princess and tackled her down to get her out of harm's way, ensuring that his own body shielded her from any potential threat from the launchers. Grunting slightly as a few stray ones struck him in the back. Without hesitation, Sakura went through a series of hand seals to summon a large enough earth wall to protect the film crew and the director from the volley of kunai that now rained down upon them. While Kakashi did the same to protect Sasuke from the onslaught. The rebels, however, had no such fortune as the kunai tore through their ranks, eliciting screams of terror and pain from the ragtag rebellion forces. Even the elder Mon's armor proved useless against the onslaught of blades that tore into his chest and stomach, with one even wedging itself into the Mon's knee, causing him to crumble down to one knee, using his sword to keep him steady as he stared up at the snow shinobi. "You will not win," he rasped out, before collapsing onto his back as the hail of kunai ceased as the launchers ran out of ammo. "I think we already have." Naruto laughed as the Konoha shinobi began to emerge from where they were hiding. As they did, a snowy field of bodies greeted them of what was once the rebel army that retaliated against Dodo and his rule. Kakashi silently lowered his head in mourning for the fallen before turning his attention back to the lilac-haired man that had ordered the massacre that would be forever etched into his memory due to his Sharingan being active at the time of the massacre. For his part, Sasuke remained quiet, completely apathetic to the fallen rebellion. On the other hand, Koyuki let out a sharp gasp, bringing her hands up to her mouth to cover a silent scream that threatened to erupt from her throat. Tears forming in her eyes. What made it even worse for her was knowing that they had all laid down their lives for her. Turning to the blonde in front of her, her eyes widened as she saw 4 kunai embedded into the blonde's back. "Don't worry, Koyuki-hime," he smiled to her before channeling some of his chakra to his back to force the embedded weapons out, allowing them to drop harmlessly to the snow beneath him. By this time, Sakura had also emerged from the earth dome she had made for the film crew, closing it behind her to ensure the crew would remain safe until the battle had subsided. Seeing the snow strewn with bodies, she couldn't help but to feel a swell of sorrow for the fallen, turning her attention to the 3 snow shinobi that still stood atop the snow pile, blocking the path. Her eyes narrowing at the 2 males of the group. "Well, that takes care of the trash," Mizore commented, earning a scowl from the 2 Hanyus and the princess. "Let's wrap this up," Nader instructed. "Kill them." Immediately the 3 snow shinobi launched themselves at their chosen opponents, with Fubuki making a dash towards Naruto, who merely smirked and jumped away, leading the pink-haired snow shinobi away from the group. Meanwhile, Mizore launched himself towards Sakura, intending on smashing her into the ground as he rose his large hands and brought them down viciously into the snow, creating a cloud of snow and dirt to obstruct his vision momentarily, while Sakura leapt away. "Stay still, so I can crush you," the large man exclaimed, trying to find the pinkett in the flurry of snow. "Yeah, sure, let me get right on that," the pinkett though sarcastically to herself, earning a small chuckle from her inner self. "You shouldn't waste your time a weakling like her, when you can face an elite like me," Sasuke stated cockily as he landed off to the side of the larger snow shinobi. "Idiot," inner Sakura commented, "he could have used the distraction to take him out. What do you expect? Tada-sensei has constantly praised him for such actions." Sakura mentally rolled her eyes. "We should hang back and see how he does." Inner giggled, imagining the arrogant Uchiha getting laid out on the ground. "Agreed, but keep on guard just in case either of them try something." In agreement with her inner self, Sakura bounded a fair distance away from the 2 males as Sasuke charged at the larger man with his kunai, aiming to disable the snow shinobi as quickly as possible, only for the weapon to deflect harmlessly off the large mon's chakra armor. "What the?" The raven-haired Uchiha wasn't able to finish as the Mizore took a swipe at him with his iron gauntlet, forcing the Uchiha to leap back to avoid being struck. Though before Sasuke could counter-attack, Mizore had launched the same iron gauntlet into the raven-haired team's direction, leaving Sasuke vulnerable in mid-air to the attack. From a distance, Sakura watched as the Uchiha evaded the initial strike from the larger shinobi. Then as Mizore had fired off his gauntlet towards his intended target whom had yet to land before she felt a familiar pull in her gut, causing her to narrow her eyes as she once again found herself in the path of the attack, while the arrogant teen was in her spot. Smirking slightly, she quickly turned the tables and switched herself out with him, allowing Sasuke to take the full brunt of the attack in the chest, knocking him out cold. "Not this time, asshole," Sakura stated as she looked down at the unconscious emo, half tempting to spit on him for attempting the same cowardice act he pulled on her in Nami no Kuni. "Ha," Mizore laughed, "you got spite, I like that in a woman." "Not interested, I already have a mate," the pinkett scoffed as she crouched down into a defensive posture. "You won't have a say in the matter," he grinned. "I'll even let that blonde brat watch as I make you scream. And once I am bored of all of your holes, I will kill him and sell you to a brothel." Hearing this, Sakura narrowed her eyes as she felt her Hanyu blood boil, screaming out for the arrogant snow shinobi's blood. Slowly, her canines began to extend slightly as her pupils turned to slits, her fingernails extending into 1.5-inch long claws. Her raging boiling over, the infuriated Hanyu launched herself towards the larger shinobi, whom was caught off guard by her sudden aggressiveness and viciousness. Even more so, when he had launched his gauntlet-like weapon towards her, only for her to catch it and crush it within her bare hands. "What the hell?" Mizore exclaimed as the pinkett barreled upon him. Once within melee range, Sakura wasted no time to rain down a flurry of punches onto her opponent, each strike echoing through the mountain sides, as the mon's chakra armor took more and more damage, buckling under the sheer amount of abuse it was sustaining. It was then that Mizore noticed the pinkett's face, and how demonic it looked, so full of fury. Vainly, the large man tried to cover himself but to no avail as the inhuman strength broke through any defense he feebly attempted to put up. With one last push, Sakura jumped up and performed a spinning back kick directly into the mon's chest, cracking the circle-like design the chakra armor had, while sending Mizore a good distance away. As the large man went sailing back, his chakra armor began to spark and crackle as the overload of energy began to build up in the chest area, causing Mizore to panic and try to rip his armor off in mid-flight, though it wasn't to be as the power surge that built up exploded, sending bits of the large man all over the mountainside and snow-covered ground, effectively knocking the pink-haired Hanyu out of her bloodlust. "He's dead," Sakura thought numbly while in shock, though also a bit disappointed that she wasn't the one to kill him, and that it was due to the damage his armor took. Frowning a bit, she looked around to see Sasuke just now starting to regain consciousness. Frowning slightly, she let out a sigh, knowing she was about to get an earful for returning the favor to the arrogant emo. Still, it felt good to give the Uchiha a taste of his own medicine. Better go check on Koyuki Haim, the Pinkett thought to herself as she quickly bounded over to where the princess was. However, she was broken out of her thoughts as a scream echoed off the mountain sides, which alarmed the pink-haired Hanyu, prompting her to dash as fast as she could to where the convoy was. Arriving just in time to see Koyuki being pulled into what appeared to be a ship in the sky, a rope wrapped around the princess's waist. Naruto-kun, Sakura-san, Koyuki screamed out before she disappeared into the vessel. Damn it, Sakura cursed to herself. With Naruto, the blonde Hanyu leapt through the tree branches, weakly throwing his shadow kunai at the pink-haired ice user as she continued to pursue him deeper and deeper into the forest until they were well away from everyone else, which slightly concerned her. She knew what the blonde was mildly capable of, due to the injuries Mizore had sustained after their initial attempt to kidnap the princess, and she was not looking forward to feeling that happen to her. Without warning, Naruto stopped and turned to face her, causing her to panic and deploy her wings from her pack to slow her down. She would have turned tail there, and flew away if the blonde hadn't spoke up. I think we are far enough away from the eyes and ears of everyone else. Naruto smiled as he leaned up against the tree. Right, Fubuki-san, what do you mean? She tentatively asked as she landed on a tree branch across from the blonde. Well, for one, Koyuki Haim would be upset if I hurt her best friend. The blonde shrugged, causing the Pinkett's eyes to widen in shock that you know of her friendship with the lost princess. And don't worry, only myself and Sakura-chan know that you are a spy for the rebels. Aside from Sandayu-san, of course. For what good it did, I couldn't warn them about the ambush. The pink-haired girl frowned. Now they're all dead, including Sandayu-sama. Nope. The blonde grinned, catching Fubuki's attention. What do you mean? No, she demanded. I just saw them get massacred. No you didn't, Naruto retorted, his grin never leaving his face. You saw my shadow clones get massacred that were hanged as Asama-san and the rebels. Fubuki could only stare at the blonde in silence in complete shock. You see, I theorized countless scenarios of how this ambush would play out. The blonde began, squatting down to get more comfortable, as I know this place would be the best opening for an ambush, judging by the map. So I planned around it. I also counted on that bastard Dodo to want to wipe out the rebellion, though I didn't expect him to employ such weapons. But if they were just clones, why didn't they disperse when struck? She questioned in confusion. Chakra reinforced, thanks to a very special girl in my life. He cryptically replied, earning a dumbfounded look from the Pinkett. I'll explain later. So what's your plan? Fubuki asked. Go and kill Dodo or something. That's exactly my plan. The blonde grinned. And we'll free your parents as well. However, instead of happiness from the Pinkett, he only saw sorrow. Are they? He didn't finish, as he saw the tears leak out of her eyes. I had to kill them a month ago. She sniffled, curling her knees up into her chest as she leaned against the tree. Dodo was becoming suspicious of me, so to test my loyalty to him, he had me kill my own parents. With a quick movement, Naruto was on the same branch as Fubuki and brought her into a comforting hug to try and calm her down, rubbing her back as he did so while she cried into his chest. I'm sorry, he whispered. It's not your fault, she sniffled. My parents were prepared for something like this. They said they would proudly die if it meant that I remained safe. I promise you this, Dodo will pay for all that he has done. The Uzumaki vowed, now having a new reason to send the vile mon's soul to Jashin. For now, we need to get back to the others. So, please forgive me. Before Fubuki could question what the blonde was talking about, she felt a chop to the back of her neck before her world went black. It didn't take long for Naruto to return to the convoy, only to see a distraught Sakura, and an upset Sasuke who was glaring at the Pinkett the entire time. Meanwhile, Kakashi was leaning against the side of the truck, reading his orange smut. What did I miss? Naruto inquired. Though looking around, he noticed Koyuki was missing. That must be why Sakura-chan is upset. Dodo has Koyuki Haim, Sakura answered flatly, causing the blonde to frown slightly. He could tell that his pink-haired mate was beating herself up over Koyuki being taken. Who's that? Kakashi asked, referring to the Pinkett in the blonde's arms. Fubuki. Naruto simply answered before making his way over to where Sakura stood. Put her in Koyuki's bed. I'm going to go get Koyuki Haim back. Nodding, Sakura took the snow shinobi and entered the trailer, ignoring the glare the Uchiha was sending her way. We should interrogate her to find where Dodo is, the masked Jonin suggested as he moved to follow Sakura into the truck. No, the blonde stated. Under international shinobi law, she is my prisoner since I am the one who defeated her, therefore she is under my care. Speaking of which, what happened to the other two snow shinobi? Nader escaped, and the other one was killed when his armor malfunctioned. Asama stated as he came out of his hiding spot, much to the surprise of Kakashi, whom quickly looked over to see the prone body of him laying on top of the snow mound he was killed on. Your plan worked like a charm, Naruto-san. The entire rebellion is in your debt. Wha? How? Was all Kakashi could stammer out, earning a grin from the blonde. Ain't shadow clones the most useful technique, especially when you can make a small army of them? To prove his point, the bodies of the rebels began to dispel in small sections, causing the blonde to slightly wince as he experienced how some of them died. Shaking the feeling off, he turned and began to walk towards the tree line. Where are you going, Naruto? Kakashi asked. To get Koyuki Hime back. The blonde simply answered, we need to wait and find out where she is being held before we rush in. The masked Jonin argued as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a hexagonal crystal on a necklace that had been on the princess's neck, before he switched it with the fake she was now wearing. Besides, I have what Dodo is really after. This caused Naruto to pause and look over his shoulder back at his supposed sensei. Congratulations Tada-sensei, the blonde commented. You just further endangered Koyuki Hime. Without that necklace, Dodo has no reason to keep her alive. Good job. Without waiting for a response, the blonde Hanyu took off with renewed speed and disappeared into the shadows of the trees. Koyuki glared defiantly at the two men standing before her. Dodo with a smug expression that he had captured her while her protection detail were distracted with the attacking forces he had sent to ambush them. Meanwhile, Nader had a lecherous grin as he eyed the princess up and down, causing her to shiver in disgust. Mizore was killed, and there has been no word from Fubuki, so best to assume she was either captured or killed. Nader reported with a slight shrug, not caring in the slightest for his two teammates. He never liked the big brute, and he was beyond frustrated that the sole female of the team would constantly refuse his advances. If she has been captured, then she will be executed for failing her objective. Dodo stated with authority as he focused his attention on the princess. Ah, why the angry expression Koyuki Hime? You should be happy for this family reunion. You ceased to be my uncle when you murdered my father and usurped his throne. She spat as she narrowed her eyes. My pathetic brother was weak. Dodo sneered as he moved towards the princess, lowering his face so he could look her in the eyes. The fool built a weapon that could be used to keep the country in line, but he never used it. My father never built any weapons. Shows just how naive you really are, Koyuki Hime. The tyrant chuckled, quickly reaching out and grabbing the necklace that was around the princess's neck before ripping it off of her. Your father spent an exorbitant amount of time and money on his ultimate project. A creation so awe-inspiring, it would shake the very foundation of Yuki no Kuni. Turning, Dodo began to walk away before he froze, staring at the necklace in his hand before he clenched his fist around it, shattering it within his hand. It's a fake, he exclaimed as he swiftly turned around, his eyes mad with rage. Hearing this, Koyuki couldn't help but widen her eyes in shock at the revelation. Her mind quickly racing to think of when it could happen. Briefly she wondered if Naruto could have switched it, but quickly shook that thought away as the blonde had been forthcoming with all of his plans and what he had intended to do. Her thoughts then shifted to when she retired to her room the morning Kakashi assigned the duck to protect her. She vaguely recalled seeing him inside her room while she slept that afternoon, causing her eyes to narrow in realization. She is of no use to us anymore, kill her. Dodo ordered as he turned to leave the room. Dodo-sama, would it be? You can have your fun with her, just kill her afterwards. Was all the tyrant said before leaving the room, slamming the door shut behind him in a fit of rage. Well, you heard Dodo-sama, I get to have you all to myself. Nader grinned as he slowly began to approach the princess, his hands working to loosen his pants. Don't worry, I'll enjoy every minute of it. Naruto-kun will come for me. Koyuki stated with defiance. You mean that blonde brat? The lilac-haired man laughed. By the time he finds you, I will have already fucked you and left your corpse to rot. Are you sure about that? Came a distorted voice from behind the snow shinobi. Just as Nader turned to see who spoke, a sudden wave of coldness washed over his body as he felt a slight pressure in his neck. Unable to move his head, he looked out of the corner of his eyes to see Naruto holding a black blade in a reverse grip position with the edge of the blade going through the snow shinobi's throat. Though what stood out was that the blonde had a rather feral look about him. The whisker marks that adorned his cheeks were far more defined, his pupils had become slits, with an eerily yellow glow around them. The fingernails on his hands had elongated into what appeared to be claws, and his canines had become more pronounced. With one quick movement, Naruto had brought his right hand around and impaled Nadara through the chest before allowing the body to drop to the ground. Having done that, the blonde flicked his right hand away, to remove any blood that lingered on his hand. Taking a deep breath, he slowly turned towards Koyuki. His features returned to normal. "Sorry you had to see that, Koyuki-hime." The blonde apologized, his head bowed. "But I strongly despise rapists. I knew you would come, Naruto-kun." Koyuki smiled as she launched herself into him and wrapped him in a hug. For his part, the blonde Hanyu was surprised. He had half expected her to shrink away in fear due to his transformation. But here she was, embracing him with all that she had. Still, he returned her embrace, rubbing her back in a comforting manner. After a handful of seconds, Koyuki broke the hug and looked up into the blonde Hanyu's eyes. "As Fubuki," she began, "she's safe." He smiled, allowing the princess to breathe a sigh of relief that her childhood friend was safe. "Sakura-chan is watching over her right now." "Thank you," she whispered, burying her face into his chest. "Come on, let's get you back to the others," the blonde stated as he moved away from the princess. "No," she said quietly, not moving from where she stood. "My uncle is on board this airship. This is our chance to end this once and for all." "Are you sure about this, Koyuki-hime?" Naruto inquired. While he had no issues in ending the life of the tyrant, his primary objective was to ensure the safety of the princess. "Yes," she replied with confidence. "His rule must end today." "As you wish," he smiled, taking hold of her hand as the two moved through the ship in search of Dodo. After a few minutes of moving through the vessel, the two eventually found themselves out on the deck of the large, airborne boat-like vessel. This was where they found the tyrant, looking over the bow of the ship, before turning to face the two new arrivals. Almost as if he had been expecting them. "You must be the brat that banged up Mizore." Dodo spoke as he fully turned to face the blonde and the princess, a sadistic grin spread across his face. "To think, mere taijutsu could cause so much damage to my chakra armor creations, though I suppose I must thank you for that." "And why would that be?" Naruto inquired, moving the princess behind him to keep her safe from harm. "If it wasn't for you, my scientists would have never seen the flaws in their own designs and give me this new and improved chakra armor," he exclaimed as he threw open his robes, exposing a pristine black-looking armor outfit, with a light blue and greenish-looking yin-yang-like seal in the center of the mon's chest. Thus crafting the perfect armor with no weaknesses. Naruto merely frowned at the mon's claim, resisting the urge to scoff at it. If the blonde Hanyu so desired, he could easily puncture the armor as if it were tissue paper. Still, he couldn't deny that there was a small part of him that enjoyed watching as people like Dodo go from feeling invincible, only to have it all come crashing down around him, and then the realization wash over him as he falls into despair. Maybe it was his Hanyu blood, but so long as he didn't enjoy the suffering of innocent people, the blonde Hanyu was content with it. "Well then," Naruto smirked, "I guess I would be remiss if I passed up a chance to test such a fine craftsmanship." "Go on, boy," Dodo exclaimed as he held his hands out wide in a taunting gesture. "Give it your best shot, I'll give you the first one free." Okay, now he is just being delusional. Ari thought from inside the blonde's mind. Well, he is about to be disappointed. Naruto smirked. Taking the invitation, Naruto created a shadow clone to stay with the princess while he charged towards Dodo. Channeling a bit of his demonic chakra into his right arm as he brought it back to unleash a full swing into the mon's chest. From the sidelines, Koyuki watched on as the blonde's fist connected with the mad mon's armor and then effortlessly, pushing through it, until it exited the other end, covered in blood. In his arrogance, Dodo had not once considered the blonde would actually be able to harm him. Though that all came crashing down the moment the Konoha shinobi's fist ripped through his chest, and exited out his back, causing to spit up a massive amount of blood out of his mouth. Shakily, Dodo turned to see the blonde, only to be met with an eerie set of yellow eyes with black slit pupils. "Jashin-chan will feast upon your vile soul, Dodo Kazuhana." Naruto stated before quickly removing his hand from the mon's chest and in a swift movement, summoning his shadow scythe and spinning it around before he severed the tyrant's head from his body in one swift motion. Once the body had fallen to the deck, the shadow clone next to Koyuki had dispersed itself as the princess ran towards the blonde. However, before she could make it halfway, an explosion ripped through the ship, causing her to stumble to the side, dangerously close to the edge. Seeing this, Naruto quickly began to make his way to her, apply chakra to his feet to allow him to stick to the deck. Damn bastard must have had a kill switch on him to set the ship to blow if anything happened to him. The blonde thought to himself. However, he was broken out of his musing as he heard a surprised shriek. Looking up just in time to see Koyuki fall over the edge of the airship. "Koyuki Harem," he shouted, pushing more chakra into his feet to propel himself over the edge. Narrowing himself as much as he could to reduce as much drag as he could, he zeroed in on the falling princess and rocketed towards her. Within the blink of an eye, he had caught up to her and embraced her in his arms as they plummeted towards the ground. Immediately, she latched onto him, closing her eyes as she buried her face into his chest, not wanting to witness her own death. However, she quickly snapped out of it as she felt the blonde's calming aura, prompting her to meet the young Hanyu's gaze. "It's going to be all right, Koyuki Harem." He smiled, ignoring how fast they were approaching the ground. "Do you trust me?" She didn't even need to think about it, and immediately nodded her head. As they fell, both stared into one another's eyes before darkness embraced them for a handful of seconds. The next thing Koyuki knew was cold air was hitting her face as they skidded across the ground through the snow for some distance, all the while she kept her eyes locked with the blonde's. Until said blonde hit a tree, the abrupt stop causing her to slip forward, their lips meeting, catching both by surprise. Before they quickly broke apart. "Sorry, Naruto attempted to apologize. However, Koyuki had grabbed his face and lunged forward once more, capturing his mouth with her own in a passionate kiss, which he returned, earning him a satisfied moan from the princess. After a handful of seconds passed, the two broke the kiss, both breathing heavily due to the lack of air between them. The princess sporting a heavy blush across her cheeks as she nuzzled into the blonde's chest, letting out a sigh in contentment as she took in his scent. "Are you sure about this, Koyuki Harem?" the blonde asked while rubbing her back. "I mean, you saw my semi-transformation and all. And I also heard you say that my uncle's soul was sent to Jashin." Koyuki replied, looking up at him with a soft smile. "That's right." Naruto nodded with a small sigh. "I am Jashin-chan's champion, and by extension I am also a Jashinist, and I have been tasked to slay corrupted souls and cleanse Jashin-chan's name across the elemental nations. I'll admit, when I first saw you kill Nadir, I was frightened." She began, nuzzling into him once more. "But throughout this entire trip, you have selflessly put myself and others before yourself and asked nothing in return. I believe you're exactly the same as Dante in your books. A devil with a human heart." Naruto could only smile at her words, relieved that she didn't hate him for what he had laid bare before her. "And that is exactly why I have fallen in love with Naruto-kun." She finished, looking up into his eyes once more. "Very well, Koyuki Harem." The blonde smiled. "We'll talk about this more later. For now, let's get back to the others before Sakura-chan kills Sasuke-tem." This earned a small giggle from the princess before she leaned in and snuck another kiss before getting up off the blonde, allowing him to get up as well. Taking hold of his hand, the two began to make their way through the snow towards where the convoy was last stopped. An hour and a half later, things were a bit boring, to say the least, between those who remained with the convoy. As instructed, Sakura had laid the unconscious snow shinobi in Koyuki's private trailer and watched over her to ensure neither Sasuke nor Kakashi could try to interrogate the pink-haired girl. Which thankfully, the masked Jonin had not even suggested it since Naruto had left. Sasuke on the other hand had spent the entire time glaring at Sakura while he brooded in the corner of the trailer. Speaking of Fubuki, the young pink-haired snow shinobi had woken up within an hour after being laid down. At first she had been frightened as to where she was, having not seen Naruto nor Koyuki around, but Sakura was able to calm her and allay any fears she had, giving her a brief update of what happened while she was unconscious and reassuring her that Naruto and Koyuki would be returning shortly. Meanwhile, Kakashi had taken to talking with Asama. The masked Jonin was shocked into silence when the elderly man had informed him of how Naruto had come up with the plan to keep the rebels safe as well as himself with the use of the boy's shadow clones, making the silver-haired man a little ashamed with himself that he didn't put more trust into his blonde student and had constantly downplayed the teen's suggestions and early warnings of the imminent ambush. Soon, however, the sounds of cheers erupted from outside the trailer from the film crew, workers, and the rebels that had gathered after the battle had ended. This of course prompted all those inside to exit quickly to see what the commotion was about. Doing so, they were greeted by the sight of the princess and Naruto approaching the group as the crowd parted way for the duo. Sakura couldn't help but smile as she saw the two holding hands. Of course this didn't go unnoticed by the other members of Team 7 either, eliciting two different reactions. Looks like he got himself another girl, Kakashi thought to himself with a bit of amusement. Lucky bastard. While the masked Jonin was amused by the new couple, Sasuke could only seethe in anger that once again, another woman had chosen the blonde dobe over him. Welcome back, Koyuki Haim. Asama greeted the princess as the two closed the distance. And thank you once again, Naruto-san, for ensuring her safety. It was nothing, Asama-san. The blonde replied with a slight shrug. Meanwhile, the princess looked directly at Kakashi and held out her hand. I believe you have something of mine, she stated. Nodding, Kakashi withdrew the necklace she had worn and placed it in her waiting hand. The next thing he knew, his head was jolted to the side as his left cheek stung from where she had slapped him. His eyes widening in surprise, though he supposed he did deserve it for taking it without her knowing. Never take my things again, Hataki-san, Koyuki stated before turning back to the group, eyeing a certain pink-haired girl, whom had her hair free finally, giving it a wild and untamed look, almost reminding Naruto of Tsume's hairstyle. Just pink. Fubuki-chan, I'm here, Koyuki Haim. The wild-haired pinkette commented with a smile as the two girls embraced in a hug. What's going on? Kakashi asked, a little confused about how the princess was reacting to the enemy shinobi that had attempted to kidnap her just a few days ago. Fubuki-san is a childhood friend of Koyuki Haim and has been our spy for the past few years. Asama replied. Naruto knew, didn't he? The silver-haired Jonin inquired, piecing together the pieces of how his blonde student had insisted she not be interrogated, receiving a nod from the elder producer. He did, right after the trio attacked us on the ship. Asama continued. He witnessed Fubuki-san tossing a scroll towards Koyuki Haim. Look underneath the underneath, Kakashi thought to himself with a slight frown. Something I have been failing to do as of late. Meanwhile, while Koyuki and Fubuki began to catch up with one another, Naruto had split off from the group and approached his pink-haired mate, whom was leaning against the side of the trailer they had been resting in. Reaching her, he gently lifted up her chin to meet her emerald eyes. What's wrong, Sakura-chan? He inquired, feeling his mate being in emotional distress through their mark. I don't know, she sighed as she laid her head down on his shoulder, wrapping her arms around the blonde Hanyu. He died due to my actions, but I feel disappointed that I didn't get to see the life fade away in his eyes. Like I was cheated out of a prize. Am I a monster for feeling this way? She must be talking about Mizore. Ari commented with a frown, earning a mental nod from the blonde teen. No, you are not a monster, Naruto whispered into her ear as he rubbed her back in a comforting manner, giving her a light kiss along her neck. This is our burden as a Hanyu. So long as you never take pleasure in the suffering of the innocent, you will never be a monster, Sakura-chan. Sakura nodded, looking up and claiming her mate's lips in a passionate kiss, before breaking apart after a handful of seconds. Thank you, Naruto-kun. She smiled before laying her head back on his shoulder. You're welcome, my cherry blossom. He replied with a smile of his own. When we get back to Konoha, I will ask Anko-chan if we can take you out and get you blooded. That way you will have an easier time with your Hanyu urges. Sakura merely nodded in acknowledgement, both scared and excited at the same time at the prospect of actually taking a life and getting blood on her hands. Figuratively and literally, as the two Hanyus basked in each other's presence, Koyuki and Fubuki approached the two. The former having a smile on her face as she watched the two. Thank you again, Naruto-kun. The princess stated, for all you have done for me. For us, and for Yuki no Kuni. We're not done yet. The blonde smiled as him and Sakura separated from their embrace, earning a confused look from the princess. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? She inquired. Do you know where your father was building that machine Dodo was talking about? It should be behind Kazuhana Castle. Koyuki replied, still not understanding where her blonde love interest was going with this. Well, I think we should go take a look at it, and maybe even activate it. Naruto smiled. What? Why would you even suggest that? She asked, clearly shocked at the blonde's suggestion. She wasn't alone either, as those that had gathered around began to mumble amongst one another. Besides, we don't even know where the key is to activate it. Naruto merely chuckled and shook his head at her reaction, causing her to pout slightly, making Sakura giggle softly at how cute it made her look. Actually, I believe I know where the key is. And I think Kakashi-sensei knows as well. The blonde commented, before gesturing towards the necklace that the princess was wearing once more. Why else would Dodo Tem have been after that? But why do you want to activate the machine? Koyuki inquired while looking at the crystal necklace that hung around her neck. Tell me, Koyuki-hime, would your father really create something that would harm others? Naruto asked with a grin. No, he was a pacifist. His dream was to bring spring too. She trailed off as her eyes widened in realization of what her father's final creation could very possibly do. Looking up, she could see the blonde nodding in agreement at her, as if on the same thought as her. Get these trucks ready to move out. We're heading to Kazuhana Castle. Koyuki quickly shouted out instructions. After a chorus of acknowledgements, the drivers and workers set to work to carry out the orders the princess had given them. Shall we, Koyuki-hime? Naruto inquired as he held out his hand towards her. Smiling, she accepted it as she pulled Fubuki along with her as the group entered the truck and departed with the rest of the convoy, heading towards Kazuhana Castle. Kazuhana Castle, 1 hour later. Within an hour, the convoy of trucks and mass of rebels diverged upon the castle, much to the shock and elation of the citizens within the town, to finally see that the tyrant had fallen and the true heir to the throne had returned to claim her throne. After quickly addressing the citizens, reassuring them that she would see to it that they were all taken care of and that they need not live in fear anymore, Koyuki led the Konoha team to the back of the castle. After walking for around 15 minutes, the group arrived at a large opening with 3 massive pillar-like monoliths that stood in a triangle formation around a massive disc-like center. Frowning slightly, Koyuki looked over the site before slowly and cautiously making her way over to a large box with a clear top, allowing her to see a sort of control panel underneath. Gently brushing off the snow, she lifted the lid. Slowly, she removed her necklace and with taking a deep breath, inserted the crystal into the single opening and gave it a small twist. At first, nothing seemed to happen. No sounds, nothing. But as the minutes ticked on, she began to feel warmer and warmer, prompting her and various other members of the group to remove their outer coats. It was then that she noticed cracks beginning to appear on the ice that covered monoliths, revealing a sort of crystal underneath. Gradually, before her very eyes, the snow and ice began to melt away, giving way to lush meadows full of wild flowers and babbling brooks. It's really here, she whispered as Naruto came up beside her, accompanied with Sakura and Kakashi. My father's dream has come true. Spring has come to Yuki no Kuni. Using the natural geothermal vents under the ground to power the machine, very impressive. Sakura commented, your father was a genius. And you have made his dream come true, Koyuki-hime. Naruto smiled as he took in the beautiful landscape that was present before him. Though much to the 3 girls' disappointment, the blonde Hanyu had not removed his long trench coat. Despite the rising temperature, turning around, the princess couldn't resist but to bring the blonde into another hug, burying her face into his chest as tears of happiness and joy leaked from her eyes, all while mumbling thanks into his chest. Smiling, Naruto merely rubbed her back. Now, I think we have your coronation to plan in a country to make a much-needed announcement too, don't you think, Koyuki-hime? The blonde asked, earning a nod from the princess. 5 days later, it had been nearly a week since the fall of Dodo, the tyrant ruler of Yuki no Kuni, and the ascension of Koyuki Kazuhana to the throne. Word had spread like a wildfire across the country, which had led to the citizens across the country to hold massive celebrations in the princess' honor. During that time, the princess had sat down and talked in great detail with Naruto and Sakura in private away from any prying ears about the Blue-Net's relationship with the young Hanyu. During their talks, Naruto had explained everything to Koyuki. From his earlier years in the village, to his first meeting with Jashin, how he became a Hanyu, and his subsequent training sessions with said goddess, which had surprised the princess to hear that he had actually met a goddess, not once, but multiple times, and have even been trained by her. Another thing that the princess took great joy in was that one of the most feared goddesses was a woman. When Koyuki had inquired about Sakura and by extension, the blonde's other mates, the pink cat had simply smiled and showed her the mate mark on the base of her neck. Explaining that she had agreed to be one of his mates after she had her eyes opened about her former crush after their missing in Nami no Kuni. Much to her embarrassment for her past actions, the pink cat had confessed to at one point being a fangirl to the brooding emo. Though when asked if Sakura had any regrets in becoming a Hanyu, the pink cat merely shook her head and smiled, citing that she would easily make the same choice, if given the option to go back in time and change things. After receiving a detailed explanation of the positives and negatives of being a Hanyu, Koyuki had insisted upon being marked as one of the blonde's mates. Once again, Naruto had reminded her that this would be a lifetime bond that would last centuries, if not more. This did not dissuade the princess any, as she made a small jest that she would be able to take care of her people and ensure the travesties that her uncle had committed would not befall her people once more. With Sakura as their witness, Naruto marked Koyuki as his mate. The blonde and princess sharing a passionate kiss afterwards, making the pink cat feel a little jealous of being left out. Giving a slight pout, only to earn a kiss from Naruto. I suppose we should drop the news to Tata-sensei that we will be staying an extra 2 or 3 weeks. Naruto chuckled as he held both girls close. Do you think the two of them suspect you being in the movie? Sakura inquired as they broke apart and began to make their way down the massive hallway that lead towards the throne room. I am sure Kakashi has, but he's kept it quiet. The blonde replied. Duck can barely see past his own nose, so I doubt he suspects anything. Should be a good surprise for him. This caused the two girls to giggle. After a short walk, the trio reached a double set of large wooden doors. Pushing the doors open, Naruto allowed the two ladies to go before him before closing them behind him. Inside the massive room, they could see Kakashi and Sasuke packed and ready to go and simply waiting for the remainder of the team to arrive. Say your goodbyes, Naruto. The silver-haired Jonin asked with his trademark eye smile. This of course earned a scowl from the brooding Uchiha. Forgive me for not informing you earlier, Kakashi-san. Koyuki spoke up, using her diplomatic tone. But I have requested that these two remain to handle matters outside of the mission parameters. To further prove her point, the princess produced a mission scroll and handed it to the masked Jonin to read over. Seeing that the two had the Hokage's seal of approval, Kakashi merely sighed and nodded his head in acceptance. This of course prompted the Uchiha to scoff and begin walking away in anger, not bothering with any farewell to either of them. Seeing this, Kakashi couldn't help but shake his head in exasperation before turning back to Naruto. You're the male lead, aren't you? It was more of a statement than a question, causing the blonde to merely chuckle while scratching the back of his head sheepishly. Well, good luck Naruto, Sakura. See you back at the village, Kakashi nodded before turning to leave. And Naruto, try not to produce an heir to the throne just yet. The last words of the masked Jonin caused a crimson blush to wash over the princess's face at the implications, and nervous laughter from Naruto, whilst Sakura couldn't help but to hold her stomach in laughter at the two's embarrassment. Konoha. 10 days later. The silver-haired Jonin let out a long sigh as the gates of the village came into view. It had been a long 10 days traveling back from Yuki no Kuni, now named Haru no Kuni, the land of spring. Almost the entire trip back he had to endure the complaining and ranting from the sole Uchiha. Most of it revolving how it was all the blonde Dobi's fault that the princess had rejected him and that she was a fool to refuse such an honor to bear his children. It had gotten to the point that 2 days ago, Kakashi had snapped at the raven-haired teen, reminding the brooding emo that he had strongly suggested that he take it slow with the princess and woo her with his charm. Failing to realize that the last Uchiha had about as much charm as a dead fish. Instead, Sasuke had all but forced himself onto the princess, destroying any chances the Uchiha would have had with the young woman. Since then, Sasuke had barely said a word to the masked Jonin, opting instead to silently seethe and stew in his own anger and hatred towards his blonde teammate. Arriving at the village gates, Kakashi quickly signed the two of them in before dismissing the raven-haired teen for the day. Ignoring the scoff the Uchiha made, the masked Jonin slowly made his way towards the Hokage's tower. Before he knew it, he was at the large wooden doors. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves for the report he was about to give the Hokage about the previous mission, the actions of Sasuke, and his own failure, he pushed the doors open and entered. Welcome back Kakashi. Hiruzen greeted the masked Jonin as he set down the scroll he had just received less than an hour ago. I trust the mission went well. Mission was a success, Hokage-sama. The silver-haired man replied, before sighing. All thanks to Naruto. I sense there is something you need to get off your chest. The old man answered with a slight frown. Nodding, the silver-haired man began to report his experience on the mission. The masked Jonin had left nothing out, reciting how the team had encountered the princess and the film crew, the princess running off initially after Sasuke had attempted to force her to return to the film crew, and how Naruto had managed to calm her down to the point that she was suddenly eager to start filming again. Revealing that he later learned that it was due to finalizing the deal for the Demon Heart movie that had spruced up the princess once more. Hiruzen remained silent as Kakashi continued to give his report, as the masked Jonin began to explain what had happened during the boat ride. How he had attempted to have Sasuke seduce the princess once her heritage was learned by assigning the Uchiha to watch over her, and how it had subsequently failed due to the boy's ego and forcefulness. Then moving on to how Sasuke had nearly killed the princess during his rant that had triggered the avalanche. Once again citing that it had been Naruto that had saved the day and had managed to secure Koyuki and keep her safe on his own. Though admitted that he didn't know the details of what had transpired between the two. Then the masked man began to recount what had happened during the ambush, and how he had brushed off Naruto's warning about the possible ambush, shrugging it off as the blonde genin only wanting to make himself look better at the time and admitting his own failure to look underneath the underneath, as he had always preached. Though with no small amount of pride in his voice, he praised Naruto for not only having the foresight to predict such an ambush, but also saving the rebels from being slaughtered by the snow shinobi forces that had set up the ambush to begin with. Through it all, the elder village leader remained silent as the masked man finished his report. Taking a puff from his pipe, Hiruzen let out a long sigh, turning his gaze towards Kakashi. I have to say, Jonin Hatake, I am very disappointed in your recent judgments. The Hokage began, though his expression softened a little. However, I am thankful that you reported your failings honestly, and that your own report lined up with the scroll I just received from Princess Koyuki. Kakashi remained silent, hanging his head down in shame, though was a little taken aback by the fact that the elder man had already received a report from the princess. Of course, Naruto has snake summons. He mentally reminded himself. Regardless of your honesty, I'm afraid I must still punish you and Genin Uchiha for your recent misconduct. Hiruzen sighed. While punishing the masked Jonin wasn't an issue, the village leader knew that the elder council would intervene in favor of the Uchiha boy. I understand, Hokage-sama. The silver-haired man stated. I accept any punishment you deem appropriate. Nodding, Hiruzen thought a moment before an idea came to mind. Until Naruto-kun and Sakura-chan return, you will be temporarily demoted to Chunin and serve as a gate guard. That's not so bad, Kakashi thought to himself. Furthermore, your pay will be cut in half. Hiruzen continued with a mischievous grin on his face, which worried the masked Jonin. You are also banned from reading any Ika book during your punishment. Okay, I can just leave it at home. And before you think you can just leave your book at home, it must be on you at all times. The Hokage grinned as he saw the masked pervert pale. It wouldn't be much of a punishment if you could simply ignore it. I understand, Hokage-sama. Kakashi relented, mentally crying anime tears of what he will have to endure the next few weeks. Very good, you are to report to the front gates tomorrow morning, at 7 o'clock in the morning. The elder man informed him. And you will not be late. Understood. The masked Jonin, now Chunin, nodded before frowning. What of Sasuke's punishment? Hiruzen frowned slightly, feeling that Kakashi was already going to slip back into his old ways and try and get the Uchiha boy out of being punished. However, that was quickly brushed aside at what the silver-haired man said next. The elders will attempt to have his punishment swept under the rug. To be honest, I have half a mind to revoke his shinobi license and seal his chakra for the stunt he pulled while in Yuki no Kuni. The Hokage sighed. However, with the Chunin exams fast approaching, with no immediate replacement genin in need of a team, that would only serve to punish the other two team members. And as you have said, the elders will aim to sweep the incident under the rug. May I suggest something? Kakashi inquired. Have him do nothing but D-rank missions inside the village. Hiruzen couldn't help but grin at the thought. It was perfect, since the Elder Council would be unable to interfere because it wouldn't be sanctioned as a punishment, just solo D-rank missions. I believe that will work. The Hokage agreed. I do believe I heard Tsume complaining about her son being lazy about cleaning the Inuzuka kennels. However, before they could continue talking, a knock was heard from the doors. The council requests you attend a meeting that has been called. A voice nervously called from the other side of the door. They probably saw Sasuke and myself returning alone and no doubt have questions or have jumped to conclusions. Kakashi speculated. Very well, let us go. Hiruzen sighed as he stood up to leave the office. No doubt they will want to hear from you. Nodding, the masked Jonin followed the village leader out of the office and down the corridor where the council chamber was. Council chambers. Murmurs echoed throughout the large room as nearly the entirety of all the council members were present, -1. Mebuki Haruno, whom had to travel to the fire capital a few days ago to take care of family and business-related issues that had been brought to her attention. It had appeared that her brother-in-law had been caught padding the numbers to make him look better in the eyes of his in-laws, possibly in hopes of them leaving the family business over to him when they eventually passed on. Now though, he was sitting in a cell for fraud, and the Haruno family was forced to take an accounting of every transaction the business had made. However, the murmurings ceased once the large doors opened, revealing the Hokage, along with Kakashi next to him. The sight of the masked Jonin brought a small smile to the face of the elders and a few of the civilian council members. Is there a reason why this meeting was called? Hiruzen inquired, his tone clipped, signifying he was not happy about yet another meeting being called behind his back. We heard that Hitaki-san and Uchiha-sama had returned, Kaharu stated, and without the Haruno girl and the Uzumaki child. Both Sakura-chan and Naruto-kun were requested to remain to attend to matters outside of the initial mission parameters. Hiruzen replied, leveling a glare at the lone female elder for her near slip-up. And why would the actress request the Uzumaki brat to remain behind? One of the few civilian council members that were still loyal to the Uchiha inquired. Surely Uchiha-sama would have been able to handle any additional task she would have required. Though it wasn't said, the implication that was implied prompted a few of the shinobi clan heads narrow their eyes at the civilian counselor that had just spoke. Meanwhile, Hiruzen puffed his pipe as he contemplated just how much he should divulge. Letting out a mental sigh, as he knew even if he didn't want certain members to know, they would still find out regardless due to gossip and loose tongues. The reason why Princess Koyuki Kazuhana, whom was using Yukie Fukikas as an alias, requested Naruto and Sakura to remain behind was due to the two being the driving force of the mission's success. Hiruzen began, earning a series of gasps of shock upon learning the actress's real name. As for Genin Uchiha, he is one of two people that have been banned from entering Yuki no Kuni, now named Haru no Kuni. This sent the elders and a handful into an uproar, upon hearing that their prized Uchiha was banned from entering the country. Why was the Uchiha banned from the country? Inquired Inoichi. And who is the second person banned? Tsume added. Due to engaging in corporate sabotage, Jiraiya has also been banned from the country. Along with his Ika Ika book series. The elder man sighed. As for Genin Uchiha, I will allow Kakashi to explain. Nodding, the masked Jonin stepped forward and begun to repeat his report of the mission. As expected, the elders and the handful of civilian council members that were still in the Uchiha camp were none too pleased that Naruto was receiving such praise, and their vaunted Uchiha was being overlooked. Crying foul when Kakashi had reported that the actions of the arrogant Genin had nearly killed the princess in the process, if not for the blonde's quick thinking and foresight. And that is why Sasuke Uchiha is banned from entering Haru no Kuni, and why the princess had requested Naruto and Sakura to remain. The masked Jonin sighed as the room erupted with shouts. Some defending the Uchiha and condemning Naruto. But surely this princess should have felt honored that Uchiha-sama was interested in her. The same civilian from before, as the room quieted down. In her own words, the Uchiha name holds no value in her land. Kakashi stated, add to the fact that he all but forced himself onto her, and nearly got her killed. Princess Koyuki holds no love for the boy. This is a grave issue. Hiyashi stated, earning nods of agreement from his fellow clan heads. All of them knowing full well that such an incident could have led to a war between the two countries. What should the Uchiha boy's punishment be? Before the village leader could answer, Homura interrupted. You can't possibly be serious about punishing Uchiha-sama. The spectacled elder stated, surely you can apologize on his behalf and perhaps get the princess to lift the unjust banishment from him, and we can work something out so as not to upset the boy. How much? Tsume growled at the elder man. How much will it take before you stop licking that Uchiha brat's crack? Until we are plunged into war with another country or village due to the brat's arrogance. The brat nearly killed the client due to the ego you all have given him, and now you are saying his banishment from the country was unjust. The Inuzuka matriarch continued, the boy is lucky not to be executed. Tsume has a point, Inoichi stated, agreeing with the feral woman. It would have been well within the princess's rights to execute the boy due to his actions. So what punishment should the Uchiha receive? Hiashi inquired, ignoring the grumblings from across the table. As I told Kakashi, I have half a mind to revoke the boy's shinobi status and seal his chakra. Hiruzen replied, however, that would only serve to punish his teammates with the upcoming Chunin exams. Hearing this, the three elders inwardly smiled, feeling they have gotten their way. So, instead, Hiruzen grinned. Genin Uchiha will be doing solo D-rank missions until Naruto-kun and Sakura-chan return. As I understand it, Tsume Dono, your son has been slacking off in cleaning the kennels. At this, the feral woman allowed an evil smirk to grace her lips. Knowing full well what the village leader was suggesting, have the run be there before 6 in the morning. Furthermore, as punishment, Genin Uchiha will not be receiving any pay for these missions. The Hokage added, now then, this meeting is adjourned. Leaving no room for the other council members to speak out, the Hokage departed the room with Kakashi in tow, while those still favoring the Uchiha boy grumbled about not getting their way. Haru no Kuni, formerly Yuki no Kuni. Koyuki smiled lovingly as she looked down at the blonde beneath her, arching her back in pleasure as she moved her hips back and forth, giving the blonde beneath her a good view of her ample chest in all its glory, as sweat glistened on her exposed skin, giving her a more angelic look. Reaching up, Naruto gently guided his angel back down to him, capturing her lips with his own as, eliciting a pleasure-filled moan from the young princess. Breaking the kiss, she smiled as she gazed into his eyes, a glazed look of lust shined within her violet blue eyes. And cut. That's a wrap, the director yelled, earning a round of cheers and applause from the entire film crew as they had finally filmed the last scene for the movie. All that was left now was the post-editing and such. Smiling, Koyuki leaned back up and draped the blanket around her, so that the rest of the film crew didn't see her body, though not moving from her position on top of her blonde mate. Before doing the scene, the princess actress had insisted that the camera be set up in a way that it only showed her back, allowing only Naruto to see her bare chest. So, how does it feel to be a movie star, Naruto-kun? Sakura asked as she approached the two. Hey, I wouldn't say I am a movie star yet. The blonde chuckled from his position under the princess. I could be the reason this movie bombs. I doubt it. Koyuki laughed. You hit your marks perfectly. Just imagine, Naruto-kun having to run away from fans wanting his autograph. The pinkett giggled, eliciting a small giggle from the princess as well. So, shall we get dressed and get something to eat? Naruto inquired. Not that I mind being beneath such a beautiful angel. Koyuki couldn't help but blush at the compliment before leaning doing and giving him a sensual kiss. Actually, she whispered, just loud enough for the two to hear her. I would like to continue this scene. Smirking some, Sakura got the hint and gave her maid a wink before turning and issuing orders for everyone to clear the set, ensuring that all the cameras were off, and the doors locked. The pink-haired girl bid the two a good time before disappearing out the door, locking it behind her. Are you sure about this, Koyuki Haim? Naruto asked, bringing his hand up to tenderly cup her cheek, prompting her to lean into it. I am Naruto-kun. She smiled as she leaned in once more and kissed him deeply, one of which he eagerly returned. Nearly an hour had passed as the two laid there. Naruto couldn't help but smile as he gazed down at the sleeping form of the princess, gently combing his lover's hair, though he knew he should get her someplace more private, knowing the last thing either of them needed was for some curious stage hand to walk in on them. Gently, he picked her up and shifted her into a bridal position before melting into the shadows. Within the blink of an eye, the two arrived in the princess's private quarters. Walking over to the bed, Naruto summoned a shadow clone to prepare the bed before he set the sleeping princess down to allow her to sleep. However, before he could pull back to leave, she wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him into bed with her. Stay, she murmured, half asleep. Smiling, Naruto complied, silently ordering the shadow clone to inform Sakura of the change of location. Konoha, the next day. No, I absolutely refuse to do this peasant work, the arrogant Uchiha exclaimed before a grinning Tsume. Tough shit runt, she stated, her grin becoming feral. Because you're pathetic as mine. Now get to cleaning. You, bit. He never got to finish as the feral woman was upon him in an instant, her clawed-like fingers at his throat. An animalistic growl coming from her throat as she stared down at the now frightened Uchiha. Bringing him closer, she let out a curious sniff, before she leaned back and sniffed again. Looking down, she saw a dark and wet stream starting from the boy's crotch and running down his leg. Dropping the boy, she let out a loud laugh at the boy's embarrassment. "All right, Mr. Peabody, get to work," she ordered as she waited, and dared for him to lash out again. Wisely, he chose not to and slowly began to set to work cleaning the first kennel, which was a disaster zone. The brooding Uchiha could have sworn that the woman had fed the dogs something that caused them to shit everywhere, considering he couldn't see the floor of the kennel. However, as he made a step to enter the kennel further, he had managed to slip on a fresh pile of dog droppings, causing him to slip. Desperately, he tried to catch himself, only to fall forward and fall face first into a fresh, warm pile of dog shit. "Damn you, Naruto," he mentally screamed, placing all the blame on the blonde Hanyu, refusing to accept that his current predicament was his own fault. And much to his misfortune, his suffering had only begun. Fubuki never considered herself a girly girl, always focusing more on her training as a kunoichi, instead of obsessing over her looks to catch the eyes of boys in her class. While the other girls were fussing over their hair and makeup, she was out improving her Hyoden jutsus. When the rest of the girls in her class were spending their weekends at spas and salons, she would be in the training field practicing her taijutsu. So why now was her face doing a perfect impersonation of a tomato? Because her hand was firmly being held by the blonde shinobi that had all but single-handedly saved her country and restored its rightful ruler to her throne. "Are you okay, Fubuki-chan?" Naruto inquired his impromptu date as he noticed the heavy blush on her face, mentally chuckling as to how this had all come about. From the quick briefing he was told from Sakura, Fubuki had confided in Koyuki about her attraction towards the blonde. The end result: the young princess and pink-haired Hanyu had set the two of them up on a date at the last minute. To add to the pinket's embarrassment, Koyuki had insisted she wear something other than her typical battle-ready gear. Gone was her chakra armor set-up and hooded coat. Instead she wore an elegant kimono, showing off her figure more than she would have liked. Even her wild hair had been done up in braided loops. The only piece of attire from her old outfit she had been allowed to wear was her hitayate, which now hung loosely around her neck. "I'm fine," she replied, rather quickly. "I swear, daimyo or not, I am going to get Koyuki back for this." "If you say so," the blonde chuckled, causing the pink-haired snow shinobi to scowl. Though the scowl softened when he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "So how about we kick off this date with a simple lunch?" "Fine." Fubuki relented, though with a small smile tugging at her lips. "There is a good restaurant just a few blocks away." Nodding, the blonde Hanyu lead his date through the bustling streets of now named Harugakure, formerly known as Yukigakure, due to the heat generator bringing spring to the country. Though after a bit of debate, it was decided that Koyuki would only have the generator on for 6 months out of the year, so as not to hurt local business and trades. Not to mention, allowing the citizens to become more acclimated to the new weather patterns brought on by the heat generator. After walking for nearly 20 minutes, the duo arrived at their destination. A quaint-looking cafe nestled in between two large buildings, making it easy to overlook if one was not paying attention. Entering the establishment, the two were immediately hit with the scent of freshly baked pastries, along with a mixture of various coffees, tea, and chocolate permeating through the air. "Smells good in here," Naruto commented. Meanwhile, Ari was salivating at the aroma in the blonde's mindscape. "It does." Fubuki smiles as the two sit down at a vacant table in the corner that had a chair on one side, and a bench seat on the other near the wall. "This was my parents' favorite place to relax at. I'm glad it survived Dodo Tem's reign." A twinge of sorrow washing across her face at the memories of her parents. Seeing this, Naruto reached over the small table and reassuringly squeezed her hand to comfort her. Receiving a small smile from the pinket at the gesture. Just before anything could be said, a waiter had arrived to take their orders. Fubuki had gone with a sweet roll filled with chocolate, and a mug of hot chocolate, while Naruto had gone with a simple hot strawberry and vanilla tea, with small baked rolls filled with cream cheese. "Would you like to tell me about them?" Naruto inquired. "My father was a doctor, probably one of the best in the hospital he worked at. He could diagnose what was wrong just at a glance, taking his job very seriously." She began with a soft smile as she recalled her parents. "And your mother?" "She was a no-nonsense kunoichi." The pinket replied. "She took her career very seriously and trained hard, made sure I didn't become one of those useless fangirls that obsessed over looks when I began the academy. Something tells me there is a funny story as to how they met." Naruto grinned as he speculated that something, no doubt embarrassing for one of her parents, had happened to get them to meet one another. Well, Fubuki couldn't help but giggle slightly. From what I was told, my mother had been training with her teammates when one of them accidentally set off an explosive tag next to where they had set their training kunai. As a result, when it went off, one of the kunai got impaled into my mother's rear. And as chance would have it, my father was the only doctor on duty at the time. The Pinkett continued. Usually with such an injury in a sensitive area, a female doctor would administer the treatment. But with no other female doctor on call, my father was forced to treat her. So, I am assuming that your father asked her out on a date shortly afterwards. Naruto ventured, taking a sip from his tea that had arrived, along with their other orders while Fubuki was reminiscing about her parents. Actually, from what my mother told me, she demanded that he take her on a date. She chuckled, taking a drink from her hot chocolate. While she was grateful that he didn't even chuckle at her predicament, her pride demanded that he treat her to dinner for seeing her in such an embarrassing state. Sounds like a book-worthy meeting. The blonde commented, prompting the Pinkett to giggle once more. I just wish I could have saved them. She sighed, gaining a distant look in her eyes. Seeing this, Naruto moved out of his seat and sat down on the bench and brought her into a firm hug as he rubbed his hand along her back in a comforting manner, allowing her to bury her head into his chest as tears fell freely from her eyes at the memory of her parents. They loved you a lot. He finally spoke softly into her ear. They knew what kind of bastard Dodo Tem was, and they were prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure you lived to see a better future for this country. Gently lifting his hands to her face, he softly positioned her head to look him in the eye as he wiped away her tears with his thumb. And now look around you. He smiled softly at her. With your information, we were able to remove Dodo Tem from the throne and restore Koyuki Heim to her birthright and freed this country. You made this possible. To punctuate his words, he lightly kissed her forehead, causing the poor girl to blush up a storm. Thank you, Naruto-kun. She smiled. What about your parents? Well, the blonde frowned slightly. Both died the night I was born. My mother died to protect me, while my father died trying to make me into a weapon for the village when he sealed the Kyuubi inside of me. At this, Fubuki's eyes widened in shock. With a small sigh, Naruto began to tell her the story of his life thus far. Finding out his father had intended to have him conditioned to be a mindless weapon for those who were power-hungry within the village, and how he avoided such a future with the help of his precious few people. Namely his hubby Haim, Anko and his queen of blades, Yugao. After a short debate with himself mentally, he had even decided to reveal his encounter with Jashin as well, citing that she was the main reason he was able to avoid such a fate and how she gave him her blessing and made him her champion. This bit had caught the pink-haired Kunoichi by surprise, as she had always thought that Jashin was a being of malice and carnage. Though the way the blonde before her had described the goddess, as she had learned, Jashin seemed more of a chaotic neutral agent in the grand scheme of things. As Naruto had explained that the goddess desired the souls of corrupted individuals, and stating that the bastard Dodo was now suffering in her realm. Which made the Pinkett feel a bit better, knowing the tyrant would get no peace, not even in death. Naruto had then gone on to tell Fubuki how Jashin had changed him into a Hanyu to help him escape the beatings the villagers would organize for him with his new abilities, and how he had met his first mate, Anko, whom had come to his defense during such an attack. Of course this led him to explain just how his mate mark worked, and what it all entailed. Koyuki Haim is one of your mates, isn't she? Fubuki inquired with a slight blush. Yeah, she is, the blonde replied honestly. She asked to be marked a week ago. So that means she is also a Hanyu, just like you and Sakura-san. She asked in a low voice, ensuring the waiters of the establishment couldn't overhear what was being said. It really didn't need to get out that the princess who now sat on the throne was a half-demon. That is correct, Naruto stated softly. Right now, Sakura-chan is helping her with her new shadow abilities. Can you mark me too? She stuttered with a blush. Are you sure you want me to? The blonde asked in a serious tone. Like I said, this would be a lifetime bond spanning hundreds of years, if not more. He received his answer in the form of a deep kiss initiated by the pink-haired Kunoichi, probing his lower lip with her tongue, begging for entrance, which he allowed, as he returned her kiss, letting his tongue battle hers for dominance. After a few seconds the couple broke the kiss, with Naruto smiling at the now flustered Fubuki. Very well, he smiled before turning his attention towards the waitress and requested the check. Paying the tab, and leaving a nice tip he got up and held out his hand towards the pinkett, whom took it, allowing him to help her to her feet, before being led out of the small cafe. Both feeling excited and nervous at the same time, wrapping her arm around his in an affectionate manner as she leaned her head on his shoulder. After walking around for another 20 minutes, the two found themselves alone in the middle of a spacious park, full of sakura trees and various other foliage that was coming to life with the arrival of spring within the country, giving it a beautiful setting. Smiling softly, he turned towards his pink-haired date, bring her in close as he wrapped his arms around her waist, prompting her to return his embrace. "Are you ready, Fubuki Haim?" Receiving a nod in confirmation, he watched as the young woman closer her eyes. Leaning in, he bit down on her shoulder, causing her to gasp slightly as he began to pump his Hanyu chakra into her. Out of instinct, she bit down on his shoulder as well, allowing their chakras to mix, and in the process, accepting his mark. After a handful of seconds, they released each other. "Welcome to the family, Fubuki Haim." He smiled. "How do you feel?" "I feel," she thought for a moment as she reached out with her senses. Her ears were a bit more sensitive, picking up the sounds of birds singing, and people chatting amongst themselves in the distance. His sense of smell had also increased, allowing her to smell the tea on the blonde's breath as if it were freshly brewed in front of her. "Incredible. Come, I'll give you a crash course in how to utilize your Hanyu abilities." Naruto smiled, before going into an explanation on how to use her new abilities, going over their uses and practicality in combat and other survival encounters. Uzumaki compound. Later afternoon. Laughter and chatter filled the Uzumaki household as the girls who resided there had gathered for the evening for dinner and to catch up and bond with one another. Ayame had come over earlier in the afternoon to help cook for all of the girls. Unsurprisingly, she whipped up a massive batch of ramen for dinner for all the girls, though Anko had snuck in some dango as well. Sitting at the massive table in the dining room were Anko, Yugao, Haku, Ayame, Hinata, Hanabi, Hana, Izumi, and Yakumo. The latter two surprisingly sitting close to one another as their topic, Naruto of course. The purple-haired sword's mistress couldn't help but smile at the way the two were interacting, especially considering their history with one another, albeit not by their own choice. Leaning over, she whispered something into the snake mistress's ear, causing Anko to take a glance towards the two young ladies and flash her own trademark grin. Seeing them like that, you wouldn't think that the two of them had such an unfortunate history with one another. Anko commented in a low tone, so that only Yugao could hear her, who nodded in confirmation. When the two had first met under Izumi's insistence, it had been a tense moment for those in the room at the time. In the Uchiha's own words, she would rather address if there would be any issues with one another early, before it became more severe. In other words, before Izumi got too comfortable within the household, with this new family. Understandably, Yakumo had been rightfully upset at the Uchiha girl that had begged for forgiveness from the Genjutsu prodigy in her part to isolate the girl for Danzo to claim, and had caused the girl much grief as a result. However, what Yakumo did next had surprised the former root member. She brought her into a hug, merely stating that this is what Naruto would have wanted. Not to mention, the young Genjutsu prodigy had also been informed about the seals that are placed on root members, as she almost had one on herself if not for the blonde Hanyu's intervention. It helps that they have a common interest. The Queen of Blades chuckled slightly. "So we got two new prospective sister wives." The snake mistress teased, though loud enough that the entire table heard her, earning a round of giggles from the other girls, with the two insinuated soon-to-be sister wives blushing madly. "So Anko-chan, seeing as you are the most experienced out of all of us," Hana spoke up with a feral-like grin. "How is Naruto-kun?" While it wasn't outright said, the implication hung heavily in the air as all the girls quieted down and turned their attention towards Anko. After a few seconds, the snake mistress allowed a mischievous grin to grow on her lips. "And just what do you want to know about exactly?" she asked. "Are you wondering how well endowed his is? How good he is with his tongue? Or perhaps how long he can go?" Each question the snake mistress asked only served to cause all the girls to blush like crazy. Izumi and Yakumo developing a slight nosebleed as impure thoughts entered their minds. "Hinata-chan knows what I am talking about." Anko singled out the Hyuga heiress, whom only returned the snake mistress's grin. "Of course," Hinata replied, "just you, me, and Naruto-kun." Celebrating his entrance into the CRA. 3 thumps were heard as both Hanabi, Izumi and Yakumo had fainted as the minds overloaded with perverted thoughts of the blonde. Kind of reminds me of your academy days, Hinata-chan. Anko teased the Hyuga heiress, whom only pouted in return, not wanting to be reminded of how shy she used to act. So, Hana-chan, Yugao called out, catching the Inuzuka woman's attention. Any particular reason you are asking? As Hana-chan thinking of taking it to the next level with Naruto-kun. Haku chimed in with a teasing smirk of her own, though a blush still evident on her face. I don't know, the Inuzuka replied, a little bit embarrassed. She had initially asked to tease the snake mistress and didn't expect to have the tables turned on her in such a fashion, now putting her in the spotlight. Though in truth, the brunette Hanyu had put serious thought into taking things to the next level with her mate. As she felt she was emotionally ready for the next step, not to mention her Inuzuka instincts were screaming at her to mate with her alpha. Of course hearing Anko reminisce about how good their mate was didn't exactly calm her instincts down any either. Hana-chan, Yugao spoke, catching the girl's attention. If you are ready, then go for it. Anko nodded in agreement, in one of her rare moments of being serious. To fully answer your question Hana-chan, Naruto-kun is sweet and caring, especially if it's your first time. The snake mistress stated, though, if your clan instincts need to be sated, he can easily accommodate for that as well. Jashin knows how many times I have goaded him into dominating me in the bedroom. Hana could only blush in response, though smiled nonetheless. Appreciative of how supportive her future sister wives were. Despite the teasing they did to one another. It was around this time that the three who had fainted begun to stir and regain their bearings. Each still carrying a blush upon their faces as they retook their spots at the table. When's Naruto-kun supposed to return? Ayame inquired, missing her favorite customer and mate. They'll be leaving Haru no Kuni tomorrow afternoon, so probably another week. Anko answered, unless they use their shadow step ability, then they will be here tomorrow. Yugao added, that's true. The snake mistress commented as she took a bite out of one of her dango. I can't wait, I miss my Foxy-kun. This earned a series of giggles from the girls around the table, seeing the usual tough as nails kunoichi show such softness. Though all of them understood just how much the blonde Hanyu meant to the snake mistress. Despite their circumstances of coming together, he was the first to actually make an effort to bond with her and get to know her on a personal level. Just you wait Foxy-kun. Anko smiled to herself. Soon as you get back, we are making up for lost time. With Kakashi, the masked former Jonin, now Chunin let out a bored sigh as he leaned against the large gate post of the village. Kakashi was no stranger to having to wait long periods of time, but usually he had his favorite orange book to keep him entertained. However, due to his punishment he was unable to read it. Though his fingers twitched dangerously close to the pocket that held his treasured book, before he pulled his hand away. To make matters worse for the disgraced Jonin-sensei, his rival, Meta-guy had come through not too long ago and upon seeing the silver-haired man on guard duty and had immediately asked as to why his eternal rival was not with his team training them. Which Kakashi had honestly replied and admitted to his own sins and failures as their sensei, earning himself a passionate speech of his unyouthfulness. Followed by a declaration by the green spandex-wearing man that he would do an ungodly amount of mundane and extreme exercises until Kakashi got his youthfulness back. Kicking up from the post, the silver-haired shinobi walked over to the guard post and sat at the desk that had been provided for the guards on duty. However, as he entered the small shack, he noticed something sitting on the desk. A simple book. Frowning slightly, he quickly flared his chakra to dispel any henge that may have been placed over the suspicious book. Not trust that one of the Anbu, namely Neko, would plant a copy of Ika Ika, just to prank him. However, nothing had happened. Satisfied that the book was not a trap, he picked it up and looked it over. Demon Heart, Kakashi noted. That is the name of the movie Koyuki was going to be filming. With a shrug, the silver-haired shinobi sat down and opened the book. After all, he was only told he couldn't read his Ika Ika books. Nothing was said about any other book. And if one of his students was going to be in the movie, he may as well get to know the story before the movie comes out. Thought you weren't allowed to read. A voice broke the masked shinobi out of his musings. I'm not allowed to read any of my Ika Ika Paradise books, Azumo. Kakashi corrected his replacement. About time you started reading something other than that smut. The brown-haired Chunin commented with a chuckle, earning a light glare from the masked pervert. At least he chose a good book. Katetsu stated as he approached the two. Hell Kakashi, I think you're the only one in the village that hasn't picked up that book series. Even Hokage-sama has been reading it. Then you too will be pleased to know that the actress Fujika's will be starring in a movie based off these books. The silver-haired man informed the two with his trademark eye smile, using the princess's alias. Not to mention, one of his own students would be in the movie as well. At this revelation, both of the Eternal Gate guards had a look of shock. But I thought she was supposed to be in the Ika Ika movie that Jiraiya-sama had been bragging about. Kotetsu commented, well, during the mission, she had got in contact with the author of the Demon Heart books, and he gave her permission to do the film based off his books. Kakashi informed the two, since it wasn't really classified. As for Jiraiya-sama, I don't know the details, but he was found guilty in engaging in corporate sabotage. From what I know, he intercepted the letter addressed to Kitsune. Well, shit, Azumo stated, blinking slightly at the news. I am sure Fujika's is relieved not to have to be in such a film. You have no idea. Kakashi couldn't help but chuckle at the memory of how the princess reacted when she revealed, with great pleasure, that the Ika Ika movie had been cancelled. Anyways, I am off. Bidding their goodbyes, the two Eternal Gate guards watched as the masked shinobi left, his nose firmly in the book that had been left on the desk. Though it was at that moment, both of the guards realized something. Azumo, I think that was your book. Kotetsu pointed out, earning a string of curses from his partner. With Sasuke, damn runt, you work like shit. Tsume prodded the irate Uchiha, whom had only finished cleaning 4 kennels in the span of a day. The Inuzuka matriarch was less than pleased with the progress the boy had made. Even Kiba got it done faster. Shut up, the arrogant Uchiha exclaimed, seething at the feral woman. I hate these fucking mutts. So far, the poor Uchiha had slipped multiple times in the mess left by the dogs, causing his cloths to be full of dog feces and urine. To make matters worse, one time after he had slipped and fell, one of the canines had decided to show the Uchiha just what it thought of the boy and urinated on his back. Mind your tongue, runt, or you'll be eating dog food. Tsume threatened with a growl. You still have 18 more kennels to go, now get the lead out. Sasuke could only grumble to himself about how he was going to have all the mutts put down and skinned to be used as rugs in his compound, and how he was going to put the bitch of a woman in her place beneath him as well as her daughter for good measure to teach them to cross Uchiha. Unfortunately for the vaunted last Uchiha, he forgot one minor thing about Inuzukas. They had exceptional hearing. Thus, he found himself planted face first in another pile of dog shit, courtesy of Tsume smacking him in the back of the head. Damn Inuzuka bitch, he mentally seethed. I'll teach that bitch to humiliate an Uchiha elite.